Coming up on Lawmakers, a Senate plan to cut state income taxes by 10% passes overwhelmingly. The House adopts legislation designed to help grandparents who raise their grandchildren. Also, the Senate passes its version of the 2009 budget and House leaders react. Those stories and more are coming up next.
This is Lawmakers, your source for all the news from under the Gold Dome. Here are your anchors, Wandy Lawson and David Zelski.
Good evening, everyone. Also on Lawmakers, the House gives final passage to red light camera regulations and several other bills, sending them to Governor Perdue for his signature.
And dogfighting comes closer to becoming a felony in Georgia. But first, our top story tonight, Georgians could be getting a 10% cut in their income taxes with the passage of the Senate tax plan. The state Senate passes its version of tax reform, and Lawmakers Sandra Parrish has the story.
The Senate first passed House Resolution 1244, reducing state income tax by 10% over 5 years.
When the people that earn the money are having a tough time, we have an opportunity, and I think a responsibility, to do all that we can to make sure that they can take care of themselves. And today we have that opportunity by passing the largest economic stimulus package the state has ever seen, the largest tax cut measure the state has ever seen, and reduce the income tax on Georgians by 10% over the next 5 years, helping create jobs, but more importantly, helping families meet the budgets that they're having a tough time meeting right now.
The second measure, H.R. 1246, which eliminates the state portion of property taxes and freezes property assessments, brought a heated exchange between Senator Nan Orrock and Senator Chip Rogers.
Do you have a point of view on which services you plan to cut as you pass these bills that cut the state revenues?
No, ma'am, I don't have a plan on anything that needs to be cut. We're sitting on a $1.6 billion surplus right now, but this resolution before you only provides a ballot question to the people of the state of Georgia as to whether they'd like to bring some predictability to the property tax system as it deals with assessments, and the elimination of the quarter mill, which I think is valued at about $85 million for this year.
What we do on taxes, what we do with our state revenues, and what we do with our state budget has everything in the world to do with how we meet our obligations as state government to the citizens of Georgia.
Either we're going to allow the people who earned the money to take care of their problems, or we are going to take it from them by force at a time when they can least afford it. We may have a differing viewpoint on this. I believe that it's their money. I believe that they earned it. You may believe that it's the state's money.
The Senate's plan differs greatly from that passed in the House.
We've vetted out, I think, the best idea, which is to eliminate the tag tax on people's cars, trucks, and motorcycles, and do it immediately. Over 2 years, they'll have no tax whatsoever on their personal vehicles. The Senate plan, 5 years, phased in. Nobody understands it. You got to hire an accountant, an H&R Block, to figure it out. The fees for the accounting will probably exceed what kind of tax break you might end up getting. I just don't think it's the best tax to help Georgians in this time.
But budget analyst Alan Essig doesn't like either plan.
I think both plans are irresponsible, and I think the governor has said it best. We're heading into a slowdown, a possible recession, a recession where we don't know the length or the depth of it. The state has responsibilities with education, with health care. 75% of the state budget is spent on three things: education, health care, and criminal justice. So if we're short money, those are the places we have to hit. And the governor, as being with ultimate responsibility over the budget, has been very forceful and very eloquent in talking about how irresponsible both of these plans are.
With such differing plans between the House and Senate, it remains to be seen if negotiators can work out a compromise with just 4 days left in the session. Reporting for Lawmakers, I'm Sandra Parrish.
Well, soon after tax reform, the Senate passed its version of the 2009 budget. Senate Appropriations Chairman Jack Hill explains a few of the key changes from the House version.
This budget, I want to tell you, focuses on people. The people who work for the state of Georgia, who keep us safe, who keep us healthy, who care for our children and grandchildren, who care for those in need. This budget focuses on those who are our partners as well, and who provide the services to those in need. We're trying to help those providers catch up on their costs. This budget focuses on education, not on funding for a few systems, but on funding for all systems across the state. You know, when we passed the 2008 amended budget, I stated that we were making a down payment on restoring the austerity cut to education. This budget restores some $56 million to austerity cuts to school systems across the state. Now, we would have restored more, except for two actions by the House that the Senate had to address before we could get started. You've probably read in the newspaper of a letter the governor has sent, and I have provided a copy for it on your desk, that states that the House budget is basically unbalanced by $17 million. So we had to replace those funds before we got started. And frankly, 15 million of those funds were from the Georgia ports. I don't really understand why you would want to cut the one economic engine that is continuing to purr along at double-digit increases even during the slowdown in the economy. So we definitely disagreed with that and want to continue to believe that as well.
The House quickly rejected Senate changes to the budget, accusing Senate leaders of bad faith in failing to move towards fully funding education. House Majority Leader Jerry Keene cited budget differences, including $10 million for equalization grants to low-wealth and high-growth school districts, a Senate cut of $35 million to the restoration of austerity cuts to local systems, $60 million in added bonds, and the deletion of pay raises for prison guards.
An interesting technique they used to, I guess, try to capture some cash is they dipped into the State Benefit Health Plan Reserve Fund, which is a reserve fund there to make sure we have necessary resources to pay the health claims of our state employees, and they pulled about $16 million out of that reserve fund, which, while may not affect it dramatically this fiscal year, certainly the next fiscal year could have a dramatic impact.
Before appointing the Budget Conference Committee, House Speaker Glenn Richardson revisited the issue of education equalization grants.
They told us they would put the $10 million in the 09. We told them that there were trust issues and that we didn't know whether they would do that. They promised us they would do it and gave us their word, and then did not do it. I don't know what else to do in this process. I'll look at you and I'll tell you I'm going to put it in or not put it in. I'm going to keep my word. And it's about time that we start doing that. It's causing this whole process to logjam, and we are adjourning 1 week from today.
Representatives Keene, Ben Harbin, and Mark Burkhalter were appointed to the Budget Conference Committee. Senators Tommie Williams, Jack Hill, and Eric Johnson will join them when that committee meets for the first time on Sunday. The House passed legislation today that would benefit grandparents raising grandchildren. Lawmakers Bridget Snapp is live at the Capitol with more. Bridget.
In Wandy, whether a parent is sick, has a drug problem, or is incarcerated, many children in Georgia are being raised by their grandparents. SB 88 would give those grandparents, through a power of attorney, certain statutory rights of parents to provide for the day-to-day care of the child. Representative Wendell Willard, who carried the bill in the House, explains.
The purpose of it is to try to keep within the family unit the children in case something happens where a parent is no longer able to provide for their own child.
Representative Willard explained what rights would be given to the grandparents.
A grandparent can enroll the child in school, in extracurricular activities, enroll the child in health insurance programs, provide access to school records that may disclose the contents of others, arrange for and consent medical dental care. 5, provide access to medical dental care to doctors and may disclose the contents of the records. 6, provide the child's food, lodging, housing, recreation, and any additional powers as specified by the parent.
Though he ultimately voted for the bill, Representative Virgil Flood expressed concerns that it does not provide financial assistance to grandparents.
But unfortunately, the bill only goes about halfway. There's a major problem with custodial rights and parental rights that allow grandparents to make sure that the children have access to school and medical services and other needed legal support. But there's a huge disparity in what grandparents get in terms of subsidies from the state compared to what foster care parents get. And I think it's a huge burden on many, many grandparents who are, many of them who are in retirement years, to have to take on the responsibility of raising children.
Representative Willard explains why a provision providing financial assistance was struck down in committee.
We had a long debate with regards to the financial impact on the state. There was a provision there providing for funding much as you have for foster children. So as the bill came through, there was some real pushback because not knowing how much from a dollar standpoint would be involved, and we had some misinformation come to us, we felt, from the Department of Human Resources at some point. So the feeling was it'd probably be best at this time not to try and deal with that financial side of it, but we still wanted to have the right to set up the power of attorney for the grandparents.
The Care of a Grandchild Act passed by a vote of 163-1 and now heads back to the Senate for its approval of the changes made in committee. Reporting live, I'm Bridget Snap for Lawmakers.
Okay, thanks for that report, Bridget. Well, 2 insurance-related bills passed the Senate today. Senate Insurance and Labor Chairman Ralph Hudgens, who carries both, begins with HB 673, which protects lien holders from an action called theft by conversion.
If, say, a person buys a vehicle and they finance it with this independent automobile dealer, the used car lot, and they go out and they're involved in an accident, it's not their fault, and the at-fault party's insurance company agrees to pay them for the damages on their car. What has happened is that a lot of times these people will cash the check and leave the car at the tow shop or wherever it was towed off, or at the body shop, wherever it was taken, and they'll keep the proceeds, and then the lien holder is uncompensated and they get a wrecked automobile back as their collateral. And so this piece of legislation, this is going to clearly state to them that this is going to be theft by conversion if they take this check and put it in their pocket and just dump the car.
After the passage of House Bill 673, the Senate passed HB 1121, dealing with insurance coverage for condominium properties.
Right now, homeowners policies there is a standard policy. When you buy a homeowners policy, you know what you're buying. With a condominium policy that the Condominium Owners Association buy, there's really no standardization, and so this is going to standardize it, so they'll be able really to compare the bids from several different companies. And where the conflict comes in is one policy will insure the structure, but they'll say that the floor coverings and the wall coverings and everything basically from the studs out are not covered, where the next policy covers it. And so this is going to define what what structures are, and it will also define improvements, and so it's going to give some standardization for the condominium insurance coverage that these associations are mandated to cover.
Again, both of those House Bills 673 and 1121 passed the Senate with no changes, so both now go to the governor.
The House today defeated a measure aimed at allowing telecommunications companies to contract with counties. House leaders claim that the Senate overstepped its constitutional powers with Senate Bill 408.
Well, it wouldn't be state revenue, it'd be local. This is paid directly to the local governments.
Any bill reducing or increasing revenue that goes through this General Assembly must originate in the House of Representatives. I think that's what our Constitution said.
Yes, sir.
The House moved to defeat the measure by a vote of 47 to 107, drawing these remarks from the House Speaker.
The Chairman of Ways and Means is absolutely correct. All bills for raising or appropriating revenue, the Attorney General has opined that includes for local governments, must originate in the House. Exclusive jurisdiction rests within the House to do that. And I want to thank him for the job he's doing, calling that to our attention. There's a little bit of uncertainty that sometimes exists with senators who wish to introduce bills that have any relation to raising and appropriating revenue. They're unconstitutional on their face.
Representative Jeff Lewis indicated that he will ask the House for reconsideration of SB 408 on Monday. The House gave final passage to revisions to the state's child support guidelines. SB 483 frees military personnel from automatic child support increases based on bonuses or increased housing allowances. The measure does not necessarily grant child support credit in exchange for increased visitation.
if you may recall, 2 years ago they wanted to try to go to a simplistic calculation, percentage calculation. We all felt that that was bad public policy, and instead the court is to look at the particularities in each individual case to determine if in fact there has been a shift in terms of financial responsibility as a result of high visitation being utilized by the non-custodial parent.
SB 483 passed 162-1 and heads to the governor's desk. The House agreed that some fake ID users should be charged with felonies. But unlike legislation vetoed by the governor last year, SB 421 exempts minors.
It included under age 21 folks. This bill excludes under age 21 and keeps it just a misdemeanor. Sometimes people who are under age 21, sometimes people over age 21 don't make the wisest of decisions, but especially sometimes folks in high school and college decide they want to do things and go places that law says they can't go, and this keeps it just a misdemeanor.
House changes to Senate Bill 421 send that measure back to the Senate. The House today agrees to Senate changes to a bill forcing municipalities to justify installation of red light cameras. Representative Barry Loudermilk led final passage of House Bill 77.
They have to go through certain engineering studies to make sure that the red light camera would improve the safety in the intersection.
What kind of proof would you have to show that it would improve the safety of the intersection?
Basically, the cities would do an engineering study. First of all, they would use National Transportation Safety Board standards as far as the categorization of a dangerous intersection, and they would do an engineering study to see if there are other methods as well as operation of red light camera that would improve the safety of the intersection. Then they would provide that study to the DOT with their application for a permit to operate.
The House gave final passage yesterday to SB 352, additional legislative oversight of some state agencies.
It sets in place a way for the House or the Senate, upon notification of rules from any agency within state government that we have legislative oversight of, to have the ability to stay any rule that may be proposed and by the committee, and then when we come back into session the next legislative year, sets into place a process also for a resolution to be adopted within the first 30 days. And if that resolution is adopted, then it will take effect by negating the rule that has been objected to.
The House also yesterday gave final passage to the Transportation Infrastructure Bank Act to make loans for roads and mass transit to cities and counties. House Bill 77, Senate Bill 352, and House Bill 1019 all head to the governor.
A bill making dogfighting a felony is headed to the governor's desk after the Senate gave final passage today to House Bill 301. Senator Chip Rogers, who sponsored the Senate version of the bill, has been trying to pass the measure for 4 years.
The final version will do what we intended from day one, and that is to criminalize the entire dogfighting industry. If you're raising dogs, selling dogs, training dogs, transporting dogs with the specific purpose of dogfighting, we want you to stop, and this new law will certainly help that, because it makes it a felony if you're involved in dogfighting. It would be a misdemeanor of a high and aggravated nature if you are a spectator at a fight. Most states have felony for spectators. We made it just below felony status. It would be a felony on the second conviction for that. But, you know, if you don't have spectators, you don't have dogfights. And so we want to send the message that not only should you not be involved in dogfighting, but you shouldn't be involved in attending dogfights and, of course, wagering on dogfights. So the only way we know how to get rid of this heinous act is to criminalize it and make sure that the message is sent loud and clear that the torture of pets in Georgia, we cannot stand for that. And this hopefully new law will send that message.
Former Atlanta Falcons quarterback Michael Vick brought new light to the measure after his guilty plea to federal dogfighting charges in Virginia. Again, House Bill 301 now heads to Governor Perdue.
Well, for the end of this legislative week, I joined Tom Crawford of CapitolImpact.com and the Atlanta Journal-Constitution's Jim Wooten for GPB's Georgia Weekly. Host Susan Hoffman asked whether the Senate income tax proposal or the House birthday tax elimination would benefit more Georgians.
Both of them would help a lot of people. There probably are a few more people that pay income taxes than have a car tag, but in either case, millions of Georgians would get a tax break.
I think it's probably just the other way around. The car tax, there's something like 93% of the households in Georgia own cars, and probably if the state numbers are a mirror of the federal numbers, that the people who would be paying income tax would probably be half.
And in either case, the governor is saying that with the current economic revenue projections, neither one is really a viable option at this point.
Let's look at trauma fees very quickly. While the House is trying to remove our car tax, there are others that want to put a $10, including, members of the House, want to put a $10 fee on top of your car tag to pay for trauma care, which, as we know, is very, very fragile in the state of Georgia. It would bring in some $74 million, I believe, a year. It has passed the Senate Finance just recently. What do we think?
I think it's got a good chance of passing the House because Glenn Richardson, the Speaker, is in favor of it. There's a recognition, I think, in both parties that we really do need to upgrade our trauma care network because, for heaven's sakes, even Alabama has a better system than we do.
We can't have that.
Can't have that. I think that's embarrassed a lot of folks, and I think there's a general consensus that we do need to do something about this.
Obviously, any of these fees, though, are going to be attached to whether or not there's going to be any decreases in taxation. So that bill actually has the two linked together, and if it can move along in that way, then it certainly has a good chance of success. Simply adding a $10 fee on top of what people are already paying in ad valorem taxes is not going to fly.
No. And there's an argument going on about whether the fee is a tax. And
whether you call it a fee,
right.
whatever
you call it, that it's a tax. And there are a number of legislators who would prefer funding the trauma center out of appropriations, general appropriations. There really isn't any dispute about the need for the trauma center funding, but the source, whether it comes out of general appropriations, whether it's a separate fee. And I think you're right, that depends on all of the other tax legislation.
That begins to shake out. Let's look quickly before we go. New cities. Is it a good idea to be creating all these new cities? We just approved Dunwoody. It's been the 5th new city in the last 28 months.
Well, you got the old argument here. You like governments that are close to the people, and the closer to the people, the better. On the other hand, is it a good idea from a management standpoint to be creating all these duplicative and extra layers of government? That's a debate as old as the Republic, I think, and you can make a good argument on either side.
And you can catch the entire legislative wrap-up when Georgia Weekly airs Sunday at 1 p.m. on GPB.
Senate President Pro Tem Eric Johnson held a press conference today to address concerns from Fayette County residents, primarily about a misunderstanding about his voucher bill, SB 458.
There's a lot of concern in the counties that surround Clayton County that SB 458 is going to allow all the children, the 53,000 children in Clayton County, to overrun the surrounding school systems, and that's absolutely not true. The recipient school system in 458 is in charge of whether to accept the scholarships or not. We've clarified the language in the House, so all of the worry that 53,000 children are going to go running across in the neighboring counties and overwhelm their already overcrowded school systems is not true. The bill has been clarified, and that has absolutely been handled now in SB 458.
And the voucher bill is still in House rules and is expected to be on the House floor early next week.
A special election to fill the House seat vacated by former Representative Ron Saylor has been scheduled for May 13th. Governor Perdue issued the writ of election for the 93rd District House seat yesterday. Saylor resigned after he pled guilty last week to money laundering. The Rockdale-DeKalb County seat will also be open for the general election, and anyone wanting to run in November must qualify for the July 15th primary.
The House Health and Human Services Committee passed the SHAPE Act today. Lawmakers Keosha Jackson tells us how Senate Bill 506 proposes to reshape physical fitness in Georgia schools.
If passed, the SHAPE Act would require Georgia schools, grades K through 12, to conduct a physical assessment test for each student. The results would only be made available upon request to parents, along with healthy diet and exercise tips. Senator Don Thomas, co-author of the bill, tells us the importance of this legislation.
This will be the first generation in the history of this country that has a shorter life expectancy than their parents. The bill is about the epidemic of obesity in children, and a good place to attack that is educationally through the schools. This will be carried out by through the State Department of Education.
In an effort to tackle these health issues, the Department of Education recently opened a new position, the Education Program Specialist for Health and Physical Education. This position was filled by Bud Reiselt, who was also present at the committee meeting.
My position entails making sure that all our health and physical education programs, K through 12,
are abiding by our rules and regulations and codes and throughout the year. We will have a committee look at this. Our advisory committee will look at it, and then we'll go from there when the bill is passed.
Again, the SHAPE Act received a do-pass recommendation from the House Health and Human Services Committee. The bill now goes to House Rules. Reporting for Lawmakers, I'm Keosha Jackson.
Legislation to require boards that administer public retirement funds to divest from Iran passed the House Retirement Committee this morning. Lawmakers Mina Hosseini has more.
Bill's sponsor, Senator Don Balfour, said that his legislation would protect Americans in both the U.S. and overseas.
It says that our state retirement funds should not be invested in companies that are doing business with Iran. I think it would be good for our citizens in the state of Georgia. I think it helps protect our soldiers that are over in Afghanistan and Iraq. We're trying to send a message to the Iranian government. You don't need to be trying to blow up our U.S. soldiers.
Senator Nan Orrock disagrees with Balfour's legislation, arguing that it would hurt and not help retired Americans.
I think that the bill could damage our investment strategy and cause us to lose in our retirement funds, suffer losses, by directing our investment strategy by legislation and tying the hands of the people here in our state who make those decisions about investing. It's not going to change what happens on the world front, but it could change the integrity and the health of our retirement funds for state employees. It may be part of beating up on Iran, and that may not be the best way to have our foreign policy conversation going with countries around the world.
Again, Senate Bill 451 passed the House Retirement Committee and now moves to the House Rules. Reporting for Lawmakers, I'm Mina Hosseini.
Well, as you heard earlier in our program, the House and Senate disagreed on the 2009 budget changes. They are expected to meet this Sunday. And this afternoon, we caught up with one of the conferees of HB 990, Senate President Pro Tem Eric Johnson.
We'll be starting to meet this weekend on the conferees on the 2009 budget. The good news is that both versions include $450 million in property tax relief. The House version has $90 million going back to restore the austerity cuts in education, and the Senate version has 53. So somewhere between 53 and 90 million additional dollars are going back to the public school systems. And so we've got a lot of positive stuff in this budget, and we just have to work our way through the differences, as we always do. And by the end of this session, we'll have a budget.
Well, coming up on Monday, lawmakers will begin the last week of the 2008 legislative session with Day 37. Lawmakers returns Monday, March 31st at 7 p.m. with all the latest Capitol news. If you've missed any part of this Lawmakers broadcast, tune in on Monday when Lawmakers repeats at 5:30 a.m. You can also keep up with all the action under the Gold Dome daily on your local GPB radio station during Morning Edition, All Things Considered, and evenings at 6 p.m. on Georgia Gazette. Now, stay tuned for Rick Steves' Europe Classics. Tonight's episode features Stockholm and Helsinki. That program's coming up next here on GPB.
And that is our broadcast for this, the 36th legislative day of 2008. I'm David Zelski.
And I'm Nwandi Lawson. We'll be back Monday night at 7. Good night.
This has been a production of Georgia Public Broadcasting.